Welcome fibre friends. You've stepped into Spellbound Stitching, where I seek to weave a little magic into every stitch, twist and skein. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. My name is Kat and I'm an avid crafter dabbling in knitting, crochet, cross stitch, dressmaking, quilting, baking, patchwork, whatever you can think of. I've probably had a go at it at some point. I'm also an indie dyer and I have just started my journey into pattern design, and I've been learning to spin this year. By day I work full-time in cybersecurity, but the rest of the time you'll probably find me either running around after my family, doing chores or knitting at the moment. You can find me on Ravelry as Broomstitch, or follow me on Instagram and Facebook as Broomstitch NZ. You can check out my online store at broomstitch.co.nz, or you can email me, DM me on social media, or comment below this video to get in touch with me. Before we dive into my enchanting podcast, I'd love it if you could give this video a quick like if you like what you see here. It also helps keep my creative cauldron bubbling, so to speak, and helps other people to find me if you can like, comment or subscribe to my videos. Subscribing will also mean that you get a notification when I upload new content. I mentioned in my previous couple of episodes that I was going to be drawing a prize winner for a giveaway for commenting below the video, and I plan to do that at the end of this episode if you can stick around with me. Other than that, I think we'll just jump straight into it. So as you might remember from previous episodes, me and a bunch of other New Zealand podcasters have been running a Kiwi Makealong, and that has been running from the beginning of our winter, so the beginning of June until the end of August. So entries for that close tomorrow. So if you haven't already, upload your photos of your finished objects by either using the hashtag KiwiMail or KiwiMail2025 on Instagram, or you can upload finished objects into the Ravelry thread that Marina has set up for entries. I'll include the links to everything that I talk about below in my show notes if you need to find out where the Ravelry thread is. So the podcasters who have been running this alongside me, and it was organised mostly by Marina from Strawberry Patches. She rounded us all up and got us all together to do this little initiative. Alana from Thank You for Knitting, Jill and Kylie from Cup of Tea and a Yarn, Lisa from Unwind and Knit with Me, Bex from Rebecca Ann Knits, Sue and Vanessa from Yarns for the South, Bibi and Stephen from Just Another Knitting Podcast, Amy from Amy Makes and Handmaiden, and Donna from Blind and Knitting. So there's 10 of us in total, and we will be donating prizes. The prizes are able to be shipped internationally for some. Entries are open to anyone. We've also had a few other prizes donated by other people in our lovely yarn and fibre community in New Zealand, so there's heaps of prizes going. So the Makealong, anything qualifies so long as it's done with New Zealand fibre or in a pattern designed by a New Zealand designer. So that can include indie dyed yarns, because it has had some of the process of making the yarn in New Zealand, even if the yarn is technically from overseas. So yeah, that's been fun. You might have noticed if you follow me on Instagram, there's been a flurry of posts, and I've tried to do one each day so as to not flood everyone's feeds, but also I needed to get my things to promote the Kiwi Makealong out there, even though I can't win prizes because I'm hosting. But it's all part of the fun, right? To promote our New Zealand fibre and makers and pattern designers. So I'm really excited that has been running so well and has had such a good response, and thank you to everybody who participated. So the next thing I guess I will talk about, following my usual structure, although I am going to throw that out the window a little bit later in the podcast, is what I'm wearing. So this is my Nightshade Society sweater by Tristan Molina from Dragon Hoard Designs. The pattern comes in 11 sizes, and the yarn that I have used is the John Arbin Textiles Yarnadelic, which is a sport weight 100% Corriedale yarn, and the colourway for this is Waltz. Now, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but you can see there is marling in the yarn, or heathering I suppose, where it's actually got quite a bit of red and pinky colour mixed with the purple. So up close it's a really stunning yarn, and then further away it's just a really stunning purple. So you can see it's got lace and cables down the sleeves. It's got a high neck with twisted rib on the cuffs as well, and it's got a split hem, which you'll be able to see in the photo that I'll put up, because it's a bit awkward trying to stand up and show you in the podcast. Plus I'm wearing track pants on the bottom, so I don't want everybody to see that. But anyway, so I use 3.25 and 3.75 millimeter needles, and the pattern calls for 3.5 and 4 millimeter needles, just because I needed to change my size to get the gauge of 22.5 stitches and 31 rounds. So I made the size 1 because I wanted a reasonably fitted sweater. It still has a fair bit of positive ease. I'd say at least 15 centimeters of positive ease. But I really like the raglan on this one. You can see the raglan stitches going down there, but it's not too deep. Like, it's still a raglan, but it's not too deep, so when I move my arms, my sweater doesn't lift up too much, and I don't have an excessive amount of fabric under my arms. So this is probably one of my favorites. I actually wore it to my job interview when I went for my job, and I wear it into the office all the time. It's super warm, super light. You can see I'm wearing it next to skin, so the yarn is really soft. It's not like super wash merino soft, and it does have a little bit of a rusticy feel to it, but I don't find it itchy at all. I mean, maybe for some people it might be a little bit scratchy around your neck because your neck's particularly sensitive, but it doesn't bother me. But I'm not particularly sensitive to scratchiness of yarn. So this sweater took me 253 grams to make, which was surprising. I bought 4 skeins and still have 1.5 left. So that's the equivalent of 842 meters, which, because it's a sport weight yarn, I guess, with only 333 meters coming per 100 grams, it usually takes me 2.5, 3 fingering weight skeins to make a sweater, like a long sleeve sweater, and 2 skeins to make a t-shirt, so I guess that's kind of right. But yeah, I was surprised at how little yarn it took, and I did get gauge. So I started this one on the 22nd of July 2023, and I finished it on the 21st of September 2023, so it stuck around for a while. I do remember having to pull out around the neckline with the short rows a few times just to get the hang of it, because it was one of the first ones I did with short rows, I think. So there was a little bit of fussing around with it, but once I got in, and I wanted it to be perfect, so I ripped it back a couple of times. But it seems like it was just a bit of a slower project for me, so I might have done a few things in between. So it's knit from the top down in the round. The sleeves I did in the round as well, so because it's a raglan, you put these stitches on hold, then you pick them up to do the sleeves, and they're a nicely fitted sleeve. It was inspired by the TV show Wednesday. So the Nightshade Society is like a secret club that they have at the school that only elite members are allowed to be participants in. So that's what this sweater was inspired by, if I'm remembering what Tristan said on her podcast correctly. It has a split hem at the bottom. You can also, she also says that you can do a fingering and mohair weight version, which would be quite nice. It's quite a light fabric. So if you wanted it a little bit more dense and a little bit warmer, having a fingering weight and mohair option would be wonderful, actually. There is another one of her sweaters that I want to make in fingering weight and mohair, so I might not knit another one of these, but then again, you never know. I might change my mind. So because of all the little bits and pieces in it, so I'd say it's for a very adventurous beginner and probably an intermediate knitter, because it wasn't easy for me, because I was quite early on in my reinvigorated knitting journey. But yeah, I absolutely love the fit, I love the pattern, I love the sweater, and I wear it all the time. The yarn also, I've had to de-pill it a couple of times, but I've noticed that it is slowing down heaps, and that's probably just to do with the softness of the yarn. And it is a non-superwash, so it needs to be hand wash only. So I guess we move on to then what's in my cup. and I've got my little handmade cup from a New Zealand artisan, and today we have mango tea because I felt like something fruity, and I've already had 2 really large coffees today, so I don't think I need any more caffeine. It's one of my favorites. It is by Honey & Sons, and it is a mango tea, and you can buy them in little tins, you can buy them in larger quantities, you can buy them in big sachets. For our wedding we bought a few of the really big bulk bags of it and put it into little test tubes as a little bit of a wedding favour for everyone. I think that was the strawberry kiwi one. They have heaps of flavours, so I like to buy lots of the little boxes so that I can sample all the different flavours. Okay, so my finished objects. I feel a little bit like a crazy knitting lady this month because I have a lot to show you. I've been knitting so hard that I've managed to finish 4 sweaters, which is a little bit insane. But now I have 4 new sweaters. So I will start off with one that was a work in progress before, and it is my Ranunculus by Midori Hirose. Hold it up there. So this is knit out of Yeah Yarn's Classic DK, which is 100% superwash merino, and there's 230 meters per 100 grams. The colorway is called Mr. Gustav, and it is inspired by the Darjeeling Limited, and it was part of her Wes Anderson collection. So I bought that during a shop update online when she released those. I only bought a couple of skeins, so when Alana mentioned Ranunculus on her podcast and said she'd managed to get some out of 2 skeins, I was like, I could do that. And I hadn't knit a Ranunculus yet, so I thought I would give it a go. But I wanted a more fitted look than the really loose gauge and wide fit that the Ranunculus is supposed to have, so I went down a needle size. So I knit this on 5.5mm needles instead of the recommended 6. And the recommended gauge for this one is 14 stitches and 20 rows, and I got 17 stitches and 22 rows. But that's okay because it achieved the exact fit I wanted. So it's a circular yoke construction, which means the increases are evenly spaced the whole way around, as opposed to a raglan where you increase at 4 specific points to give you shoulders and arms. And it's got a sort of cable work, but it's more just some fancy stuff with passing slip stitch over and things like that, and a little bit of really basic lace, just so it gives you some texture and a little bit of lace around the yoke, which is a lovely finishing detail. I made a really cropped version as well, being that I only had 2 skeins, and that I really wanted something that I could chuck over the top of dresses, just to cover my arms when it's just a shoestring dress and maybe it's not quite warm enough, but also to wear underneath my dungarees. So it is a really short little version. So I knit it to where I wanted it to fall, which is just below my natural waistline, and then and then I divided what I had left into 2 balls and picked up the stitches for sleeves. The other cool thing about the Ranunculus is that it does have a few little raglan stitches underneath the arms, just to give you a little bit of shaping. So I guess it's a combined yoke as opposed to a pure circular. And because I wanted the sleeves to shape to my arms, I did do decreases underneath the arms. You can see it gets skinnier as it goes up. So those finish just here, just above my elbows. I just did 1 by 1 ribbing on the ends of the sleeves and on the bottom because I find it a little bit stretchier than the twisted rib that I did on the top of the sweater. It was a very interesting cast on. I'm not sure I liked it. I don't know that I will use that one again. I will use my preferred method of the tubular cast on. I can't even think of what the difference was, but yeah, I found it a little bit strange. Didn't like it as much, but can always change that next time. And I also noted that it had short rows both in the back and in the front, and when I'm wearing it, it does tend to creep up a little bit in the front, so I would probably skip the short rows in the front next time I do it, purely because I like an intentionally high neck like this one, or something that sits around my collarbones, because if it sits up touching the base of my neck, I find I tend to pull my sweater down all the time. But when it's up just a little bit further, like there's a danger area, I guess, for me. So anything below where this is sitting and anything above where the bottom of the rib is, I don't like things touching that area, and I feel a bit constricted, and I notice I fiddle with my clothes heaps. So I'm really happy with this. I'd probably just skip the short rows next time. And I have noticed when I'm wearing it with a dress, I don't need to pull it down so much because it kind of stays where it is. Whereas if I'm just wearing it as a t-shirt direct onto skin, then I fuss with it a little bit more. But it's just me being picky, I guess. It probably depends on the day and how stimulated I'm feeling too. Very basic, really easy pattern to use, not overly complicated. You do kind of need a little bit of knitting knowledge, but it would probably be fine for an adventurous beginner or like a first sweater pattern actually. I may make another one, I may not. I kind of think if I made another one, I'd much like to make it in a totally different fiber and texture, so maybe like just a single mohair, and make it long sleeve so it can go over the top. Or I did just watch Alana's last episode, and she's done a beautiful one out of a DK cotton and linen blend, so that could be really nice. 3/4 sleeves, make it a bit longer so I could wear it with jeans. I guess we just see where the knitting journey takes us and what I'm feeling like casting on at the time. Or, you know, that thing that happens where you spot the perfect yarn and you just have to take it home with you, and you don't necessarily have a project for it, but if you buy a couple of skeins, it's nice to know I can get a t-shirt. A little bit of a sidestep. I also felt like doing a quick, easy, scrappy project. I had some Malabrigo Rios worsted weight yarn lying about, and I had found this pattern on Ravelry that I really wanted to give a go, and it was a little dog sweater. So it looks a little bit strange, I guess, not on the dog, but I will put some photos up of it on Frank, and obviously the demonstration photos that are on the pattern too. But I just used 2 different balls of Malabrigo Rios and I striped it. So 2 stripes of the bluey purple, 2 stripes of this other colour, because the other colour had this bluey purple in it. You can see there's bits where it looks quite melty and it's not really standing out. But yeah, I cast it on. I started it and finished it in the same night. I particularly liked that this one looked like it had quite a tight neckline, because Frank has a habit of getting his front legs out the front of his sweater, and when he wears it with one leg out we call him Tarzan, and when he manages to get both legs out and it's slipping down his body, he's a merman. So it's totally adaptable, obviously, for any size dog or length that you want. Next time I would probably make it a little bit longer, because Frank is a sausage dog, so he's quite long in the body. But I would probably stop it at the same place because his undercarriage isn't quite as long as his back. You know, legs and stuff get in the way. But there are 6 size suggestions in the pattern, from really little tiny dogs to quite large dogs. I used a 4 and a 5mm needle. The 4 was just for the ribbing to cast on, and the ribbing down the bottom here. Little flat bit of ribbing. There are decreases at the back where you cast off underneath. It's quite cleverly written. It's a free pattern by CalicoRoad knits, and it's got like an I-cord, so you don't have curly stockinette on the edge of your sweater, but it's also got decreases to make it this nice V shape on their back. Yeah, it's very well thought out. It's got 2 little holes for the legs. I did make a modification where I did single crochets around the edge just to tighten them up a bit, because they were quite stretchy, and like I said, Frank tends to get his arms out of sweaters. He still does in this sweater, so next time I'm going to make the neck even a little bit more snug, and I'm going to make, probably not cast off as many stitches on the sides here. And it's also got a hole in the back for the lead to come out, so he can wear that over the top of his harness with his lead coming out the back of the sweater. So all in all, I'm really happy with it, and so is he, and he's been wearing it non-stop because he's an absolute sook when it's a little bit chilly, and it has been cold in the last couple of weeks in Upper Hutt. We've had minus temperatures. There was even a chance of snow weather warning, but the snow didn't come, so that's a little bit disappointing, but that kind of tells you how cold everything's been. When I get up to go to work in the morning, everything's frozen. So we look out over a park, and all the grass is frozen in the mornings. But that's the Edinburgh dog sweater. The next one was also a work in progress at some point in one of my other episodes, I can't remember when, but it is the Sanna cardigan by Rebecca Clow, or Clow, who is the Crayabaya Knits. She also has a podcast if you want to go and check her out, and plenty of patterns on Ravelry. She was having a birthday sale for her patterns, because I noticed when I was flicking through that every single Rebecca Clow pattern was in the most visited. I'm not sure if it's still going, but you might want to check it out. Anyway, she has heaps of gorgeous patterns, and there are several in my favourites and on my to-do list. But my version I chose to make in some dark harbour yarn, Port DK, which is 100% superwash merino, and it's 115 gram skein, which has 229 meters on it. So this is my version. It's showing up really pink on the screen. I don't know why, and I don't really know how to fix it, but the colour's blowing out heaps. But you can see just how beautifully variegated the yarn is. So the colourway is called Glazed Beetroot, if that gives you any indication of what the purple should be like. And it's not this pink. It looks like beetroot, pickled beetroot in a tin. But I bought it at Wellington, which is a market that happens in Wellington fairly regularly with a group of indie dyers. I used the recommended pattern needles are a 4 and a 5 millimeter needle, but I know that I'm a bit of a loose knitter. So I decided to knit the lace with 4 millimeter needles. I knit the cuffs with 3.25s because I like a tight cuff around my wrist or around my hands. I don't like baggy unless it's really intentional. And then for the button band and the band around the bottom, I used a 4 millimeter needle, no, 3.5, sorry. The gauge was 16 stitches and 30 rows, and that's what I got using my chosen needles. And the size that I made was the size 3. So I used 3.15 skeins, which means I've still got like 98 grams left of my last skein. I only just cracked into the last skein. So I've got enough to make a hat or a pair of mitts, so I'm pretty stoked about that. I started this one on the 11th of June, and then I finished it on the 2nd of August. So it's an all over lace cardigan. It's worked from the bottom up in the round. So there's no sides, there's no seaming on the sides. So you knit this whole thing all the way around until you get to the armholes, and then you split and you do the front panel, then the back panel, then the other front panel. So it's a repeating lace motif. There's only 2 motifs that make up the whole sweater, so it's easier to show you the sleeve. So there is the one that looks like these, and then there's a second one that looks like this, and they're separated by a garter band for each one. And the instructions were so easy to follow. Even it being an all over lace cardigan, I had no issues whatsoever with it. Which is certainly a different experience from what the cardigan I had initially chose to knit this yarn in, and I hated the process and I wasn't really loving the finished product, so I just sort of decided to frog it and stop. It does say it has a drop shoulder design, but I sort of feel like that's more like an inset shoulder, because there is a little bit more width under the arm, and they sort of stop right on the edge of my shoulder when I'm wearing it. It's got options for a short sleeve or a long sleeve. I wanted a long sleeve, but obviously being an all over lace pattern, you could make it out of cotton and make yourself a gorgeous summer cardigan. When I wear it, I tend to wear it with the top 2 buttons open, but I have worn it with the buttons closed as well. It's surprisingly warm. So in my office, they keep it a steady temperature around 20 degrees, and I just wear this with like a tank or a singlet top underneath. And I'm the perfect temperature throughout the day. So the sleeves knit in the round in separate pieces. So you knit the whole sleeve and then you stitch it on at the end. So that's a sewn in sleeve. So if you don't like seaming or sewing, this might not be the right pattern for you. But honestly, it was so easy and it was so little sewing. All I had to do was make sure I pinned it in the right places. There's a couple of points in the pattern where it tells you to take note of where you finish the motif. Luckily for me, it sort of worked out that I finished the 2 repeats of the motif before I had to cast off for the top. And it uses a 3 needle bind off, so you get a bit of a, it's a bit hard to see, a little bit of a raised seam, but it's really neat and tidy, and the seam on the outside looks like that, so it looks really neat and tidy. Really well thought out, really pleased with the pattern. It says to wear it with 0 to 8 centimeters of positive ease. When I made this, I made it to fit snugly because I knew that the wool would block out a little bit. So now, as you can see in the photo, I'm really happy with the fit, and it has been worn to work many times already, and I plan to keep wearing it as an office staple because I just love it so much. Okay, so next one. These are all, by the way, Ranunculus counts for the Kiwi Makealong because it was made in Kiwi yarn, and so does the Sanna cardigan by Clow because it uses Kiwi yarn as well. So this one is another one that uses Kiwi yarn that I decided I needed to cast on for the Kiwi Makealong, and that is the Instant Crush by Locatelli. So that is an all-over colourwork mohair held double sweater that is a raglan, so it's similar to this where you increase at certain points to create a sleeve and a front and a back. It's knit in the round top down, and the yarn that I chose to use was Prosper yarn on their mint base, which is their silk mohair blend, and this is my version. So I'm really happy with this one. It's so light and so fluffy. So in total I used pretty much exactly what the pattern says. So I used 39 grams of each of the colours. So I have 11 grams left of each of the colours. That is the light pinky colour, which is the blossom, Tusk, which is the white, and Tidal, which is the teal, and Lulu, which is the purple, which is also blowing out in this light on the camera. I don't know why. I use 1.58 skeins, so 79 grams, because they come in 50 gram skeins, which have 419 meters per skein. So it was exactly what the pattern said that I needed. I used 4mm needles and 3mm needles, which were the recommended size. The gauge is 19 stitches over 25 rows. And I started this one on the 3rd of August and cast it off on the 19th of August because I just worked on this at the time. I didn't have any other projects on the go because I desperately wanted it. And we managed to get through several seasons of Yellowstone while I was knitting on it. I started off by colouring in my charts. So I printed out the pattern and I cut in black and white and I coloured in the charts, but I actually swapped where I was going to have the teal and the pink because I decided that whilst I didn't mind it, I wanted there to be high contrast the whole way through. And when I had the pink and the white together, it didn't show up as much as I wanted it to. So in my swatch, it was fine. And I changed my mind when I got a part way through knitting it. But that's okay because it sort of worked out and reflected the teal and the purple together in the cuffs, the same as up here in the neckline. So the sleeves are knit straight. So if you have more bulk in your upper arm, like I do, I would suggest going up a needle size for your arms because they fit snugly on my upper arms and they're quite loose on my lower arms. Purely because silk mohair doesn't have as much give as wool. So there is quite a lot of short rows at the back to raise the back of the sweater. So you can see that's quite a bit taller than the front. And I guess just because I can, I should show you the inside, show you my floats. Yeah, pretty neat and tidy. I did catch the floats in some places, and you can kind of see it just because of the mohair. But I actually don't mind it because I kind of think it adds to the sweater in this case, because there are points like in here where you can see there is a little dip of colour in the triangles anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me that you can sort of see the purple poking through where I caught the float. It doesn't bother me, and I think the more that I wear it and the more that the mohair clings to itself and sort of mats down, I think that problem will just go away. But I highly recommend the pattern. I highly recommend making yourself a sweater out of mohair how double, because it is so warm, but it's so breathable and light. Like, you'd think you would overheat in a sweater that's fully mohair, but I don't. This has also made several trips into the office, and my boss complimented me on this sweater yesterday, so that felt pretty good. Okay, so the next one that I have was will I, won't I, knit it kind of thing. And I decided, because it was Kiwi yarn, and that because we had the Kiwi Makealong going and I had the yarn, that I would knit it. So this is the 3 Seasons cardigan by Wool and Pine Designs. It comes in 10 sizes. I guess I should have told you that the other two, the Sanna cardigan and the Instant Crush, also come in 10 sizes, so they're all size inclusive patterns. The yarn that I had for this one was a Yarn Therapy Merlin worsted, which is a blend of 90% superwash merino and 10% linen. So in a 100 gram skein there is 180 meters. I bought 5 skeins of yarn to make this cardigan, but it turned out that I only barely cracked into the 5th skein using 4.08 skeins, which is the equivalent of 734 meters. So again, I have basically a whole skein that I can make a hat or some mitts or something out of the remainder. I've used this yarn before and I know it blocks out heaps. So here is my version. So the design is cables and lace, and you can see it's got a gusset on the sleeve to keep the pattern correct. I'll show you the back. So the cable pattern goes all the way down the center of the back too. Absolutely gorgeous yarn. It reminds me of Boysenberry Ripple. And I got some gorgeous handmade buttons from Miss Muffet Knits at Fibertron. And they go perfectly! And believe it or not, the handmade buttons were cheaper than buttons purchased from big box stores like Spotlight. And I think they just give it such a nice touch. There's beautiful texture on the buttons as well as on the cardigan. So because I know this yarn blocks out quite a bit and it's quite loose and drapey, which you can see is how it's sort of flowing and hanging, I decided to make the size 1 because I prefer fitted but not tight. So this one, as you can see in the picture, the way that it fits me, I still do have a fair bit of positive ease. It's actually probably a similar fit to this one. So it's fitted on the sleeves, but there's still a bit of give around the middle. So the colourway for that one is the Chattering Order of St. Beryl's, which was part of a collection that Jo did. So it was a bit of a shop drop, so to speak. So I snaffled some of that up. I knew exactly what I wanted to make as soon as I saw it. I used 4.5, 5 and 5.5 millimeter needles. There's no information about gauge on the Ravelry page, but my gauge worked out at 17 stitches and 21 rows. It's knit from the top down. You start with a provisional cast on and you knit the back panel first. It gives you a good opportunity to get the hang of the lace and the cables. And then you pick up the shoulders and you knit down the front panels, 1 each. Then it tells you to knit the button band because it affects the way that the cardigan sits. And then you sew up the seams underneath. So there is a little bit of sewing, just sewing up the middle. I just use mattress stitch, which gives you a pretty seamless look. And then you pick up stitches around the armhole to knit the sleeves on. I mentioned before there is a bit of a gusset under the yarn to keep the pattern right. But eventually you get to the end of the gusset and you're just doing the lace. 2x2 ribbing on all ribbing areas, using the smaller needles for that. So that's where I used the 4.5mm needles on my cuffs again, because I like a fitted cuff. I learnt a new cast off with this pattern as well, which was exciting, and it's called a faux sewn bind off, which makes it sort of look like an Italian sewn bind off. See if I can get a good shot of that. So it sort of looks like the stitches roll under without having all the fuss of having to do a sewn bind off. It's so quick. It's really quite stretchy. And I used it on the instant crush as well. So it's really clever. They have video tutorials of all the stitches and things that they use in Woolen Pine Designs patterns. The support on their patterns is great, and the resources that they provide are amazing, which is one of the reasons they're one of my favorite designers. But yeah, there's instructions included on how to do any new stitches. So if you purchase that pattern, you'll get to see the videos. So that is my 3 Seasons cardigan. Making another pile of my finished objects over there. Hopefully it doesn't fall down. And my last finished objects is technically 2 finished objects, because I've made 2 pairs of socks. So they're just my standard vanilla sock recipe. Now these ones are my partner's, well, other half's socks. So they're a little bit big for my sock blockers. But I thought I'd put them on there anyway, just because I haven't washed and blocked the socks. So that's one pair, and the other pair are on my Tootsies, so I can't show you. But yeah, that's handmade in yarn. Self-striping sock yarn, and it's her Silver Sparkle Stellina. I don't know if you'll be able to see the sparkles. A little bit of glinting happening. Cameras don't pick up sparkles very well, which sucks, but in reality they're super sparkly. And whoever thought you'd need sparkly toes? But I promise you, you do. So I sort of did a bit of coloured management to get the toes and the heels the same on their pair. I haven't worried so much on my pair. I can get 2 pairs of socks from 1 ball of yarn for us, because they have a size 8 foot and I have a small 6.5 skinny foot, so I can thankfully get 2 pairs of socks out of 1 ball of sock yarn, 100 grams, 400 meters. The colorway for this one is Lollipop, and when you order one of Amy's gobstoppers of self-striping yarn, they come with a matching Lollipop stitch marker, sorry. So that's pretty cute. The socks are 75% superwash merino, 15% nylon, and 10% silver stellina. I knit all my socks in a tube on 2mm needles from top down. So I start with the ribbing and then just knit a big tube, get to where I need to go. So in this case, I think it was 22 stripes, and mine have 20 stripes on them because a wider sock meant I needed more stripes to get the same length. Then I put a toe in, and then I measure 2 inches less than the foot to know where to cut in the heel. And I use the Kirby Werby Afterthought heel method. So I'm just going to have a little sip of tea. That brings us to the next section, which is new cast-ons. So I've sort of started a little bit of a slow burn project, shall we call it. I've cast on the Battenberg blanket by Sandra Paul. And my plan is to make a queen size blanket out of my scrap DK yarns. So anytime I finish a project, I'm going to make one of the coloured squares. And then once I have enough coloured squares, I will use some sort of commercial yarn for the neutral in between colours. I haven't decided what colour. I don't know whether I'm going to go black, grey, probably not cream, because in my household cream doesn't stay cream for very long, because we have pets that like to sleep on our bed. I guess I'll show you some of the squares. I'm keeping them all in this box for now, because there's obviously going to be too many in the future, but I am using a 3mm crochet hook, which I'm keeping in the box so I don't lose it. And I'm just doing a whole bunch of little squares. This is how far we've got so far, of all the different colours because once I've got enough, I'll figure out placement as well. I don't know whether I'm going to try and do a fade or whether I'm going to do like hot to cold colors, or whether I'm just going to do all the purples together, all the reds together, you know, I don't really know, but you might recognize this color, and that is the glazed beetroot Port DK from Dark Harbour Yarns that I made my Sanna cardigan in. So it's kind of going to serve as a memory blanket too, because that sort of means every project that I've done will have its own little square in my blanket. But it is intended to go on my bed because we both like sleeping under weight. We have a weighted blanket on our bed, so having a fully wool blanket on our bed will be great. So that's some yarn that's also Dark Harbour yarn. It's called Hot English, but that's a project from my other halves. I think they made a hat because they've just started to learn to knit. So yeah, the plan is to use a bunch of different colours, just put a whole lot of scraps together, see where we end up. But it's just gonna keep going and going and going, and that's great, I think. So it'll be all different kinds of yarns. I'm going to try and stick with superwash and not put any non-superwash in here, just because I'd like to be consistent, and most of my projects are superwash. I haven't decided what, but I am going to do a non-superwash blanket. I just have to figure out what pattern that is. So that is a free pattern on Ravelry by Sandra. I started on the 23rd of August, one Saturday. I just grabbed all my scraps because I had them in a little organza bag, and made one each before I picked up my knitting. I have said I wanted to do a little bit more crochet, so that's just sort of going to itch the crochet, scratch the crochet itch for a little while, I hope. To make a blanket, 34 by 30 takes 1,020 squares, which is roughly 3,500 meters of yarn, which gives you a blanket that's 180 centimeters by 156 centimeters. And the average queen bed is 153 centimeters by 203 centimeters. So I guess once I've made it, or once I've got enough to do 34 and 30, maybe I'll pin them together and lay them on my bed just to see if I want to make it longer to hang down the sides or not, before I actually start sewing together. Now in the pattern, she has developed her own like continuous join as you go method, so that you're supposed to have your plain squares and your coloured squares making them at the same time. I just plan to sew mine up because I want it to be like a scrappy long-term project. So now I'm kind of going to combine 3 sections and totally throw my normal format out the window. But we're going to do what's in the queue, acquisitions, and upcoming events all at once. So as you know, I went to Faebound, which is a yarn festival held in Hamilton, which is sponsored and organised by Purple Sprouting. So that's Paula. She does a fantastic job every year. I didn't get many photos because I was having too much of a good time chatting to people and looking at all the yarns, and I got a little bit overexcited, as you do. But I had a wonderful day, and it was really nice to see so many people, and thank you to everyone who came up to say hello. I really enjoyed meeting you. Those were some of the highlights of my day. So thank you. And please don't be shy. Some people said, oh, I don't want to bother you, but it's not a bother, I promise. I really want to meet you if we do happen to bump into each other at yarn events. Hopefully the purple hair, which is showing very pink, did give it away. Now you can see why my cardigan's blowing out so much. My hair is not pink, it's purple. But my first acquisition that I got from Faebound were these gorgeous little earrings from Julie from Wool on Wheels. And they're tiny little skeins of yarn. Aren't they cute? And they're purple. So they had to come home with me. They were mine immediately. So that's my first acquisition. And that's sort of my only standalone acquisition. Because everything else is intended to be something for what's in my queue, which is very good of me, I must say, to have had a plan going to Faebound when doing yarn purchasing. But first I will talk about the Hohi knit along for autumn or fall. So I think unfortunately sign-ups have closed, but actually because she's on the other side of the world, you might still have time. If you rush over and fill out the form from her Instagram or on her website, you might be able to get in for the autumn knit-along. So there is also a 25% off code that she's got available for her knit-along, which goes until the 31st. So being that that's America, that will probably be Monday. So the code is Joji Fall KAL 2025, and that will give you 25% off any of her patterns on her website or in Ravelry. So that's pretty cool. Like I'm sure most of us have at least one Joji pattern on our queue or in our favorites. So because our Kiwi Makealong is finishing on the 31st and Joji's is starting on the 1st, I think, I have had the Cake Pop sweater in my queue for quite a while because I wanted a really nice feather and fan, one of my favorite lace patterns, sweater. And this one is fingering weight yarn held with mohair. The pattern comes in 9 sizes, and I have chosen some Fibre to Go Primo, which is 100% superwash merino. It's a 4-ply fingering weight, and it is a beautiful white with purple and green speckles. Isn't it lovely? So that's my first acquisition of yarn purchases from Fibertron. I spotted it and I ummed and ahed, and I was like, oh, can I trust myself with a white sweater? But I'm going to trust myself with a white sweater. But yeah, that's my Fibre to Go. So there is, how much is there? There's 360 meters per 100 grams. And like I said, it takes me roughly 3 skeins to get a full arm length sweater, 2 for a t-shirt. So that should be plenty based on what the pattern says. So it recommends a 3.5 and a 4mm needle. So I ordered from Wild and Woolly Yarns in Milford some Cessia Vivian. Look at how fluffy and soft that is. It's gorgeous. It feels like it weighs nothing, and it's so soft. Like, this is the kind of yarn I feel like you need to be able to feel through the screen. Like, it's not, the Prosper yarn stuff is super soft and super lovely, but Rowan Kid Silk Haze is a lot not as soft as this. And I saw BB had some of this on one of her podcast episodes. I wasn't sure because I hadn't been able to squish it in person as to what the texture was like. So I messaged her immediately, and she was like, yes, you absolutely need some Vivian in your life. So the plan is to hold this with this and make myself a beautiful feather and fan cake pop sweater. Snip from the top down in the round according to the pattern, and it should have 0 to 10 centimeters of positive ease. I'm really looking forward to making that, and that's going to probably be my next cast on. My plan is, at the moment, because I've got a couple of languishing whips, because I haven't had anything to talk to you about with whips, because there are none. I haven't been working on anything in progress. So my plan is to cast off 2 things before I cast on a 1 thing. Okay, so the next one that I have in my queue is the Glittering Snowscape Shawl by Stephen West. Now my plan for this one is to make it for a lady who has become particularly special to me, so I'm going to knit her a shawl for her Christmas present. Now it's a mixture of different textured stitches and lace in this pattern. It's with 5 colours of fingering weight yarn, and in the demo ones he's got it going light to dark, but I think I'm going to go dark to light. And I got several different yarns at Fibertron to achieve this. So the first one is some more Fibre to Go, but this is their Twist and Shout base, which is more like a sport weight. So there's 350 meters per 100 grams. So that'll be the first color on the shawl. I guess a little bit more information about the pattern. It's on 3.5 millimeters. The gauge is 24.5 stitches by 48 rows. But as you know, I'm not terribly fussy when it comes to gauge on a shawl. So I'm just going to knit it with 3.5 millimeter needles and see what size it turns out. It is a semicircle construction. So I've also decided, because it's a fade and I got a couple of sparkly yarns, that I'm going to do solid colours up the top and sparkles down the bottom. So the next one in the fade is this one from Dye Studio 54. Now that is on her Super Silk base, which is 400 meters fingering weight yarn, 100 grams. So 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon in this one. It doesn't bother me at all that I'm using different kind of bases for this shawl, and I don't think the wearer is going to care either. I was more concerned about the colours working, so that's the next one in the fade. There is sort of a, well, I guess this one comes next, and it is Purple Sprouting Twinkle Sock. So that is teal for 2, and you can kind of see some of the glitter coming through, showing up. That's the next one that I chose for in the fade, because I wanted tealy greens, not bright greens. So now there's a bit of a gap because I haven't got this colour, and I've decided I'm going to dye something to fit in between this one and the last colour. The last colour is also Dye Studio 54, but it's on her Sparkle Sock base. So that's the last one. I don't know if you'll be able to see. Oh, there, you can see the twinkle. So I haven't decided if I'm going to do sparkly in between or if I'm going to leave a plain one in between and let the two sparkles sort of shine. Excuse the terrible pun. Let me know what you think. But that's my 4 so far. And there's got to be a colour in between to blend these two, because there is teal speckles in here that match this one, but I need something that's got a little bit more of this colour in it and a little bit more of these colours, sort of, yeah, in between. But I'm really excited to cast that one on. That's probably also going to be a slow burn project. And again, I need to cast off 2 before I can cast off on a new one, but I've got until December to make that, so I'm not in a rush. And I imagine, because it's a Stephen West and there's different sections and there's so much interest, that once I cast it on, it won't take me very long to get into it, and I'll probably have it finished in a month, maybe 2. See how we go. So the last part of my acquisitions, and also what's in my queue, is the Soft Current Tee by Wool and Pine Designs. This one got released a couple of weeks ago, and I bought it on release day immediately because I knew I had to have this t-shirt. You can sort of see in the pictures, but not quite, but it's got this beautiful flowing cable pattern, but it flows over the shoulders and around down the back, and it all lines up, and the way that they've scaled the pattern for bigger sizes means you don't just end up with heaps more stockinette. They've added different parts to the cables to make it look the same pretty much as a really small size to a quite a large size. And there's 11 sizes in this pattern, so it is very size inclusive, but they've done a fantastic job making it not look like you've just tried to adapt a smaller version. And it's just gorgeous. So that one's knit on 3.5mm needles. The gauge is 26 stitches by 36 rows. Now to get that, I think I'm going to have to do it on 3.25s. I'm kind of looking at a size 2. Probably have to do a gauge swatch. It's knit in the round, top down. There is short row shaping on the front and the back. It says on the Ravelry page. It's worked, the front and the back are worked back and forth until they get joined at the underarm, and then it's all worked in the round. Yarn that I purchased for this one was from Dye Stock Yarns, and it's called Rainy Day Flowers. And just look at that. It is grey with punches of purple and pink. And she had a swatch knit up, and that's exactly what it looks like when it's knit up. It's just tiny blips of like 2 or 3 stitches that have this vibrant hit of colour. And I ummed and ahed and went, you know what, I can get a t-shirt out of 2 skeins. And I knew this one was coming, so that's what it's going to be. I'm really excited. That one probably going to be maybe in October, November cast on, because it's too cold for t-shirts at the moment, and I want to be making some more fluffy sweaters and some lovely shawls to wrap ourselves up in. But that's my last acquisition from Fibertron, and my last what's in the queue. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is new patterns or designers. Lately in New Zealand, a lot of Advents and Solstice yarn collections have gone on sale, getting ready for getting it all done for December. So I was sort of thinking, well, I really want one, but what am I going to make? So I had a little bit of a hunt around Ravelry for some things that I wanted to use an advent for, just as ideas. Maybe I won't get to them, but it was nice to have some inspiration, I thought. So the first one that I found was the Yugi by Noriko Ho of Nori-chan Knits. There's 10 sizes in this pattern. It's knit on 2.75 and 3mm needles of a gauge 27 stitches over 42 rows. So it's on 4-ply fingering weight yarn, and it says you need 786 to 1,586 meters to achieve this pattern. I imagine for smaller sizes you will end up with some leftovers from your advent, but you will get all the colors in one garment, which is quite cool. It's knitted top down flat until joining in the underarms again. It's a cropped fit, but obviously you can make it as long or as short as you want. And I was sort of thinking I might even look at making a dress if I've got enough of my advent skeins left. But it's a cute chevron stripe, so it's not just a straight stripe. And the chevron, I imagine, is just achieved by clever placement of increases and decreases. And it's got a really nice open round neck, which I also really like. But it's not a designer that I've heard of before, but I thought it was really cute and I wanted to share it with you guys, just in case you thought that it was something that you'd be interested in using your advent for as well. I'm really excited. I have ordered a yarn advent and I have ordered an accessories advent for myself. And because my other half has just started their journey into knitting, they've done crochet in Tunisian before, but because they've just started knitting, I also ordered them an advent as well for Christmas. So we're going to have mini unboxings. So I guess let me know if you want to see both in the podcast, or I guess I'll show you my one at least, but if you want to see theirs as well. So I've got the Dye Studio 54 one coming and they have the Yarn Therapy one coming. Let me know if you want to see both or none or whatever your preference is. The other thing that I found was the Intrical Wrap by Erin Curup. It's also a 4-ply because most people tend to get their Advents or Solstice collections in a 4-ply weight. And this one needs 797 or 926 meters. And I think it'd probably be good for one of those ones where you get a couple of main skeins. I haven't really dived into the pattern, I haven't bought it, so I haven't really looked into just how much you would need. But it's knit on a 3.5mm needle with a gauge of 19 stitches over 25.5 rows, so quite a bit looser than the previous one. It is described in the pattern as potato chippy and satisfying, which is a lot of people's favorite kinds of knits. It could be for your advent, or you could just do it for a scrappy project. It'd be perfect for a gradient. It's worked on a bias, which means you get that slanting effect. It's a modular construction, which I guess is because you construct it in blocks. And the pattern includes tips for modification, and there's both written and charted instructions. So those are just two that I thought might be helpful if you're looking for inspiration on what to do with your advent. Now I normally talk about an indie of the episode, so because I've featured her yarns plenty of times already, and I've just mentioned that my other half has bought their advent, I'm going to talk a little bit about Jo from Yarn Therapy. Now she is based in Levin, but often travels to Wellington to show her yarns. She's the organizer of Wollington with a group of her other friends from the indie dyeing community. I did bump into her at Fibertron and got to have a really nice chat. But you've seen a few projects now of her yarn. Our particular favourite is her Merlin base, which comes in a 4-ply and a worsted weight, which is the 90% superwash merino, 10% linen. She also has a lace weight Surrey silk fluff. She's got other 4-ply bases, Luxe, which is her merino yak blend. It's a singles one, I think. Didn't write that bit down, that was silly. We're also a big fan of her Tweedy base, which comes in DK and 4-ply, which has Donegal neps, and a high twist sock. I think that one's called Trust. So I mentioned that my other half has the solstice calendar from her, which is 21 minis, and you can see in the photo next to me that it is called Bugger. This year is based on shiny, gorgeous bugs, and looking at the colour palette, And I think it sort of leaned a little bit more to my other half's colour palette, but I was sorely tempted to get it for myself. But because they've got it and I still get to see and squish the yarn every morning, that's probably going to be good enough for me. So go check out Jo if you haven't already on Yarn Therapy. She's got plenty of yarns in stock at the moment, and every now and then she does outrageously cute collections. I think the last one she did was a Muppets collection. So yeah, I highly recommend her yarns. Go check her out. Beautiful lady, beautiful yarns. Now that we've done an indie of the episode, I usually share a bit of a crafter's tip with you. And today I just wanted to talk a little bit about needles. So there's usually a brand or a type that people decide they like and are fiercely loyal to. So like it's a constant debate between whether metal needles are better or whether wooden needles are better, and kind of comes down to personal preference. So my personal preference is to do most of mine on my CalicoRoad circular needles. And that's purely because I like the sharpness of the tips because I got the lace set. And the fact that the cables are interchangeable. So I've got the full set. I really splashed out and bought myself the full set. So it's got size 2.75 up to 10 millimeter. And I've got a few others that I've added. Personally, I like the 13 centimeter tips as opposed to the 10 centimeter tips, but I do have some of the 10 centimeter tips because sometimes it's just easier. I also got this little pouch that has all my cables in it organized, so they're all still in their little baggies, and all my other little bits go in the front, and that just fits inside the needle case, so I can zip it up and carry everything that I need with me. So they're my favorite because I like circulars because of the length and the flexibility it gives me, and because I really like the lace tips. But when I did learn to knit, I learnt to knit on straight needles. So I have a collection of like my mum's old straight needles. So that includes like these little tiny guys, which I have no idea what the size is. I'd have to use my needle gauge to figure that out. But you know, really big chunky 4 or 5 millimeter needles. And then I've got some plastic ones that have really rounded tips. I think these might have even been my Nana's. They're size 7. And then I've got a bunch of different other, oh, those ones are also plastic. So these ones are plastic and they're even more rounded. They're quite flexible, which is good. But I also have metal ones and a collection of vintage metal needles, but you can see they're quite rounded, which works better for thicker needles, thicker yarns. But obviously you're limited with how long or big a project you can do on straights. Trying to get a full size person's jumper pieces on straights can be challenging, so I tend to use circulars. Trying to knit like a big Stephen West shawl, impossible. But baby knits, perfectly fine on straights. Scarves, perfectly fine on straights. If you're knitting a hat flat, perfectly fine on straights. But I tend to do most of my stuff in the round, so I use my circulars a lot, and I hardly ever pick up my straights anymore. But I do have a preference for using DPNs for socks. So I have both Knit Pro wooden ones, Symphony ones, and I have Knit Pro Zing metal ones as well. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but the tips on them are quite dull, which I don't particularly enjoy. But it is what it is. I haven't managed to find any sharp DPNs, so if anybody knows of any, let me know. But when you've got a particularly splitty yarn, like a bamboo or something, you don't want a sharp needle. Or bamboo again is also really slippery, so using metal needles, your stitches can tend to fly off the end if you're not careful. I had a little bit of an issue trying to do the mohair held double on the Instant Crush, but that's just because I didn't have any bamboo or wooden needles. So I guess the next thing on my wish list for purchasing for knitting is a set of CalicoRoad bamboos. To turn the light on because I've lost the light. So hopefully that doesn't mess with things too much. But yeah, I would say experiment with different kinds of needles to find the ones that you want. So I didn't immediately start with a set. I had bought a couple of little singles of fixed cable chalgoos and the detachable ones like these, just to try them to see what they were like. Decided I really liked them and I wanted more sizes, and the more economical way for me to do that and have all the accessories was to buy it in a kit, and I will continue to add to the kit. Yeah, I think it's that some people are fiercely loyal to one or another, and other people like me just knit with whatever. My other half has a liquor set, a copper needle, and they're not quite as pointy as the chalgoos, but they're pretty good, and they really love them, and I'm not a fan of the way that the cable joins on their needles, but they're happy, so what does it bother me? Just have a play around, experiment with what works for you. If you prefer knitting on straights, find some projects that work for that, but I would seriously encourage you to try knitting in the round because it will change your life. I think Lisa from Unwind and Knit With Me has said it a few times that when they got back into knitting full force, they learned about knitting in the round and were shocked at how many options were available. Actually, funnily enough, I think when I first started getting back into knitting, like I was a crocheter exclusively for years, and I really wanted to do a pattern. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember what I used or anything like that, but it was an in the round pattern. And I went, oh no, I'm not doing that. So I adopted it to be able to be knit flat and sewn up, which seems like an absolute crazy thing to do, but that's what I did. Until I got comfortable with the idea, I guess, of knitting in the round. So just the best tip I can give you is do what works for you. And if that means exclusively using bamboo needles, then do that. If it exclusively means knitting on stainless steel needles, or only using chalgoos, or only using, I don't know, addies, in the end it's up to you, and don't let anybody tell you that you're wrong, because you're not. So after I do my crafter's tip, hopefully it's helpful, I usually give a bit of a cyber tip as well. So today I wanted to talk about open and free Wi-Fi networks. Now Wi-Fi is a commonly used term that we use to refer to wireless access networks, which is technically not right because Wi-Fi is actually the standard that they're expected to align to, but that's technical details, but everyone just calls it Wi-Fi. So you might notice sometimes that there are free networks available at like airports, train stations, or transport hubs, the hairdressers, local cafes, the library, hotels, etc. And those are fine to use for general web browsing, or if you need to look up, say, the time that the train arrives or something like that. But I would caution you against using them for anything sensitive. So when you're connected to an open or free Wi-Fi network, for example, don't log into your internet banking. Make sure you're connecting to a legitimate free or open Wi-Fi network, because sometimes an attacker will set up what we call a rogue access point, which is a fake one that's meant to look like a legitimate one in order to watch what you're doing. They're monitoring your traffic and wherever possible stealing useful information or passwords or whatever else it is that they're after. So making sure you look at signage that declares what the open or free Wi-Fi network's name is, and making sure you're clicking on that particular one, not one that's sort of roughly the same. And obviously, if you do need to do anything sensitive, like check your internet banking or log into a payment portal of some kind or payment processing, I would do it over a VPN, which is a subject for another day, but that's a virtual private network that you can set up for yourself, or just using your mobile data. And if you need to connect your laptop, connect it using the mobile hotspot function. Particularly with work devices, a lot of acceptable use policies in businesses say that you're not allowed to connect your work device to an open or free Wi-Fi network, and that's the reason why, is because they're open. They can easily be tampered with, or fake ones could be set up, and you don't know who's listening or watching while you're using them. So they're fine to use for general stuff, but anything a little bit sensitive or that requires you to log in or make a payment, I wouldn't use an open or free Wi-Fi network for. Then I guess the next thing I normally do is a bit of a shop highlight, a Broomstitch feature, I guess. So the yarn that I chose to bring today to talk about is my colourway called Rejuvenate, and that is a lovely green. And I did look at it in between my fade for the yarn that I have for my shawl, my Seven West one. It's not quite right. It's a little bit more greeny than what I want. It doesn't have enough of that tealy colour, so I'm going to adapt this recipe just to do a single skein for my shawl. But as you can see, it's available on both my Half DK, which is 100% New Zealand Superwash Merino, and my Hereditary Sock base, which is 80% New Zealand Superwash Merino and 20% nylon blend. And I don't know if you know, but each of my yarns have a little story attached to them on the website, so you can get a little bit of an understanding of what my inspiration is for this one. So this one was made at the same time as the one called Healing. So obviously I had a healing and rejuvenate kind of vibe going on in the dye studio that day. But I really like this one because it does remind me of Pounamu, which is greenstone, or sort of related to jade, which is a precious stone in New Zealand, prized by the Māori people, and it is a treasure, or a taonga. So it's got these dark grey speckles all through. It's got lighter bits and bluer bits and greener bits, and it's a highly variegated yarn, and it is on my list to make something with. I just haven't decided what yet. So again, if anybody's got any suggestions, let me know. I did send one of these out as a thank you to a test knitter. She chose it off my website, because when I do a test knitter call, I say that you can pick a skein of yarn off my website, or you can pick some patterns to the equivalent value, and I will gift those to you for testing my patterns. So that's available on my website, broomstitch.co.nz. Maybe one day soon I'll have something knitted for you in it. Maybe I'll just do a pair of socks. Don't know. We'll see. Normally then I move on to what books I've been reading and what podcasts I've been watching or listening to. So last time I mentioned that I had started Jacinda Ardern's book called A Different Kind of Power, and I have finished that book and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, to be honest. I didn't read it for the political views. I read it because I wanted to understand her perspective as a female leader in New Zealand, in the world, in general, and understand a little bit more about the human behind the Prime Minister, which I've learnt, and I feel like her values definitely align with my own. So things like being a human first and foremost, as opposed to being the Prime Minister in her case. And leading with kindness and consideration for others is something that I really admire, and try and live by myself. We may not always get everything right, and we may do some things that other people disagree with, but I think as long as we're trying to stick to that and be better people overall, I think the world can only get better. So that's kind of how I live my life, and it gave me a little bit of reassurance hearing that from somebody who's been in the positions that she has and had the experiences that she has. It just sort of reaffirmed that my way of viewing things and thinking about things and feeling about things isn't invalid. So that was really nice, and I highly recommend the book. It didn't have an awful lot about politics and policy and things like that. It had a little bit about intention, but it wasn't an overly political book. It was more about the woman and the experience, which made it a really enjoyable read for me. So now I've taken a complete left turn, and I have started reading a book called Faebound by Saara El-Arifi. I'm sorry if I got the name wrong. But I'm a few chapters in, and I'm really enjoying the world that she's painting and the way that she's telling her story. She's descriptive without being overly so, and she uses, I'd say, quite elevated language, or like very flowy language. Like instead of saying she sat with crossed legs, it'll say things like she sat with her legs folded beneath her, which I think is just a really nice, gentle way of saying the same thing. But it plays into the whole vibe of the world that is being created. Some of it sounds pretty awful, and because they're in the middle of a war, it's not exactly always going to be pleasant, but a lot's happened in the first few chapters, and I'm really interested to see where it goes. There is also a second book that's come out. I think it's called Spellbound, and the series is still being written. So if I like the first one, I think the next one will be the second book in the series, and I'll have to put the pre-order on my wish list when it becomes available for the third. So I'll let you know how I'm going with that. But I listen to most of my books on Audible because that allows me to knit at the same time. So I can get 2 hobbies in at once. And on the other side of that, if I don't want to just listen and I also want to watch, I watch a lot of knitting podcasts. And because we're doing a Kiwi Mail and I need to get through the list of everybody's podcasts that I watch on there, the next one I'm going to talk about is Thank You for Knitting, which is Alana's podcast from Black Cat Knitting Company and Lupine Wool Co. So Alana has a shop in Parnell in Auckland called Lupine. And her design brand or name is Black Cat Knitting Company, and that's also the brand that the podcast falls under. She usually films it in the shop when she's doing a regular podcast episode. Those happen once a month, and then in the fortnight in between she does a little bit of something else kind of video. So it's not following the regular podcast format. It'll be something that she's gone to see that's related to yarn or an event or anything really. Which just breaks it up and makes it really interesting and fun. She's a prolific knitter, so like I just had 4, 5, 6, 7 finished objects for this episode. Lalana has a similar amount in hers every single time. She does a lot of shop knitting samples, so you get to see how her yarns that she sells work up. And she was the reason that I knit a Ranunculus, because she knit 7 and now she's cast on 2 more, which means she will have knitted 9, and then she's decided because it's so close to 10 she might just knit another one. But she's very informative in her podcast. She's got a lovely voice to listen to, very soothing. She's done a couple of episodes where she's done interviews with people. One of them was her husband and how they decided to set up their yarn store and their little journey there. So that's really cool to understand the background, to know a little bit more about Alana from that perspective. But I highly recommend her channel, and you should definitely go check her out. Very entertaining watch. And I featured in an interview in one of her episodes at the White and Upper Wool weekend, so that was heaps of fun. I was a little bit, I guess, what is it when you fangirl over somebody and you go, oh, that's the person that I watch on YouTube. Oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly talk to them. But of course I did. And Alana is super lovely in person, just as she is on her podcast. Now, normally I'm supposed to give a life update at this point in the podcast, but I don't really have anything to tell you. I haven't really been doing anything other than knitting, which you could see, based on my huge pile of finished objects. I did catch up with James for a coffee from Joy of Yarn and had really good, wonderful chats with him. So it was lovely to see and hang out with somebody in person from the yarny world. Went up to Fibratron, had a wonderful time, but that's really about it. Yeah, I don't think anything else exciting has happened. I have booked a bit of a spontaneous idea to go for a holiday sometime in the summer, so that's something to look forward to, I guess. My daughter's just had her 16th birthday, so now I feel really old. She can get a license and start driving herself around places. But other than that, not really anything happening to me. Other than, let's get into maybe drawing a winner for my giveaway. So I had 41 entries, 41 people enter the draw, I should say. Some people entered more than once by commenting on both episode 5 and 6. So I have all your names in a bowl here that I'm going to just mix up and I'm going to draw live so that we can be sure that I haven't cheated and given it to somebody that I want to. Let's see, who have we got? Linda Goldstone 8883. So if this is you, I'm going to tag you in a comment, but reach out to me and I will sort you out a prize. And I'm going to gift some skeins from my shop, and the winner can pick out the ones that they want. So yeah, get in touch with me. You can email me info@broomstitch.co.nz, or you can comment below the video, and I will sort out a prize with you. So congratulations to Linda. Very exciting. And if I don't hear from Linda, I guess I will redraw it, but I'm hoping that she will see this episode and get back to me swiftly. So that's it for my podcast. And ending on a high note. Very cool. That's all for today, I guess. For now. I hope you've been inspired by something that you might have seen here on my podcast, whether it was a pattern or some beautiful yarn. Thank you again for choosing to spend some time with me. And if you could like and subscribe, that would be hugely helpful for my channel. Obviously, there are more milestones to reach, and there will be more giveaways along the way. If you want to join me for that journey, I would really appreciate it. But I do deeply appreciate choosing to spend some time here with me today. So for now, I'll close with my usual blessing of may your yarn never tangle and may your projects always enchant. Remember, a little bit of magic goes a very long way. Happy crafting, everyone.